Hey folks, Dave here with an early look at the Insurgency Sandstorm beta. What you're looking at here is a modern FPS title with some very hardcore shooting mechanics and a very intense respawn mechanic. The primary game mode is a traditional capture the point mode, but with a twist. Your team only gets a couple of respawn waves. It's not quite as intense as the one and done system of Counter-Strike, but with only about maybe 5 respawns for your team, you're going to have to fight very hard and very carefully for objectives to get additional respawn waves for your team. Now, if you guys are familiar at all with the kind of games I enjoy, everything from Arma 3 to DayZ, I'm definitely down with the hardcore shooting mechanics. But before we dive into all of that, let me preface this video by warning you guys that, as I already stated, this is a closed beta. That means different things for every game, so let me explain what it means for this game. The developers of Insurgency Sandstorm have explained that for their beta, they wanted the game to be, if not feature complete, then nearly feature complete. This game has a wild amount of content for an early beta. Just about every class is usable, with tons of different primary, secondary weapons and gadgets to fill out those class loadouts, and there's even tons of cosmetics for your character right here in the first closed beta. What this means, though, and what they've warned us about, is that performance is what they're going to work on next. They wanted the content there first to get it out for feedback, and there is a pretty rough performance issue here in the beta. If you turn your graphics settings down to, say, medium or medium high, some mixture of all of the above, you can maintain a pretty solid 60 to 80 FPS at 1440p, which is what I'm running the game at right here. It's not a huge issue to have unfinished visuals at this point. The real issue is in the frame timings. You guys are going to notice in the footage that there's a pretty nasty and pretty frequent hitching to the frame rate. This happens frequently when you aim down sights, or you take fire, or you are shooting at an enemy. Basically, all of the worst possible times for the game to stutter and hitch is when it happens. Now, the developers have kind of explained this. They said that one of the things that's really missing in this version of the game is the lower detail models that are supposed to load in at distance. So a lot of the objects on these very detailed new maps here in Insurgency Sandstorm, the details are loaded in at just way too far away. So your game is overwhelmed with just tons of CPU overhead as it's trying to maintain all of these assets as you're running around the map. So that is what is really missing in this first version. I wanted to warn you guys up front because, again, the hitching is going to be pretty noticeable here in the footage. That's not my computer, that's just the current state of the game. All of the beta disclaimers aside, let's talk about the game modes first. Again, I already mentioned this is a capture and defense mode, but it is completely dependent on your team's remaining pool of respawn waves. Even if you're out of respawn waves for your main base, you can get an additional respawn wave for your entire team if you capture one of the capture points. This leads to some of the best moments of Insurgency Sandstorm, and it reminds me of the intensity of locking yourself up in a room in Battlegrounds, for example, and all you're doing is straining to hear footsteps because you know that you're outnumbered, surrounded, and it's all about to go down. I had a couple of really clutch moments like that were just absolutely thrilling within 20 minutes of installing the game and hopping into my first match.
We're capturing it! Look out! I'm throwing a grenade!
Get moving, go!
Where is he, RangerDave?
Move it!
Got him! I need...
Reloading!
I also can't not talk about the fantastic sound design in this game. It reminds me of a mix of Bad Company 2 and PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. There's a lot of really nice realistic chatter back and forth, including radio chatter for both factions. There's callouts, and tons of great environmental and explosive sound effects. But I love the small details, like after you fire a super loud shotgun blast, you actually hear that plastic shell clattering across the floor in a really nice sounding multiple stage sound effect. And let me tell you guys, the footsteps in this game, you're going to spend the entire time constantly looking around in paranoia because the positional footsteps are so accurate that you're going to hear your teammates walking up behind you on the next floor above you. This is probably some of the most polished sound that I've ever seen in an FPS game in its beta stage outside of the Battlefield series. Super impressive. The game also features some co-op modes where I would recommend that new players hop in first to get a handle on how the spawn system and weapons work, but for the most part the AI seems a little bit brain dead at the moment, and this part of the game just feels like it's in a less complete stage of development compared to the PvP modes. As I already alluded to earlier, the weapon mechanics here in Insurgency Sandstorm are fantastic. I'm loving this trend of smaller developers really putting some serious TLC into the firearms in their game, not only getting them super accurate as far as details, visuals, sound effects, and animations go, but really just making them feel like their real-life counterparts. There's tons of just fantastic weapon animation detail, like looking at your magazine for the 1911 before you slap it in and rack the slide, tilting the pistol back so you can actually see the round entering the chamber, and you know that you're now good to go. Just the overall accuracy and attention to detail is something that I love to see in games like this, and all of the weapons look fantastic. Again, they're all very hard hitting. I always love games where every shot could potentially be a kill shot. This leads to an interesting mix of skills where new players might want to hang back, but could still get some really satisfying headshots and ambush kills if they use their environment to their advantage, listen for footsteps, and take more experienced players by surprise. Veterans, though, are going to get really good at those classic FPS twitch reflexes, and they'll be able to Rambo a little bit into the more dangerous room clearing scenarios, for example. Additionally, in your loadout, depending on which class you've picked, you might be able to pick additional armor to help you with those close quarters combat scenarios. Speaking of loadouts, let's go over those as well. There's, again, a ton of different options for the weapons, and I love the point system that's used here in Insurgency. Every class has an excellent variety of different things to try out, but if you want to use a weapon for a class that's not really meant for it, even if it's there in the list, it might cost you additional points from your loadout point pool. If I'm playing as an insurgent, picking the shotgun is a pretty low point cost. Do you want a pistol? Well, smaller pistols might cost 2 points as well. A larger pistol, like a 45 caliber 1911, might cost you 4 points, and if you want a suppressor for that pistol, well, that's not really set up for the class that you've chosen, which I think for insurgents I was running as a explosive specialist, so that suppressor is going to cost you 3 points extra just for the pistol. And at that point, you're kind of out of options. You're not going to have extra points to get additional armor or weapon accessories like lights, lasers, flashlights, and all that stuff. The wide variety of options for every class means that there might be a couple of balance issues as the game progresses, just because players might discover some kind of super OP combo, but for me personally, I love the variety, and I'm confident the devs will keep an eye on the balance of the game overall. I probably won't be covering a ton more of the first beta here, just because the performance is a little bit frustrating to deal with in the short term. I am really loving the beta here though, and the intensity of the firefights, just as I found them to be super intense in the original game. And I just don't want to sour the experience by playing a whole bunch with these frame rate hitching issues. For a game that started out as a source mod, and even at launch still looked basically like a source game, this Insurgency Sandstorm sequel has come so far, with tons of extra environment detail, and little things like the extra gore effects that might catch you by surprise as you watch a teammate literally lose his head right in front of you as you're about to take an objective. This is a game that knows what it wants to do and is off to a great start, giving that to its audience. For now, guys, I'm going to leave you with some very intense footage here from one of my first games in the beta. I'm going to be running as a couple of different classes, but primarily I'll be the Breacher class. You guys can of course find more information about this game down in the description. For now, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
Yeah.
I'm reloading! Hey! I'm loading!
Hey, get some patio ribby.
Ah, what the fuck?
New magazine going in! Loading!
Alright, hey! We're getting low, man! We need to focus!
You didn't have ammo, bud.